All right, welcome to lesson 20, where we're going to talk about the perfect indicative and pluperfect indicative active of omega verbs, plus the perfect infinitive active. So, thing one, we're adding in a new principal part, the fourth principal part. So we have pareo, the first principal part. That is for the present active and middle passive and imperfect active and middle passive. The second principal part, which is for the future active and middle. The third principal part, which is for the aorist active and middle. And now the fourth principal part, which is for the perfect and pluperfect active only. So let's look at the perfect infinitive active. So here is the first person singular perfect indicative active of pareo. So that is the fourth principal part. That's the stem. There's the ending. Pepaideuka. We're going to translate that I have taught. Pepaideukas, you have taught. Pepaideuken, with a new movable. He, she, it has taught. Pepaideukamen, we have taught. Pepaideukata, y'all have taught. Pepaideukasin, they have taught. And the pluperfect indicative active, if possible, we're going to augment that fourth principal part. We'll talk about what if possible means in a moment. And we add the pluperfect indicative active ending. So epipaideuke, I had taught. Epipaideuques, you had taught. Epipaideuken, Cain, he had taught. Epipaideukemen, we had taught. Epipaideucata, y'all had taught. Epipaideucason, they had taught. So the perfect indicative active, I've given you the first person plural here. We have taught. It has perfective aspect, right? Perfective aspect means the action is viewed as completed. So we have taught, we've completed the teaching right now, okay? Epipaideukamen, pluperfect indicative active, we had taught, also has perfective aspect, but it's talking about completed action in the past. So we had taught, the action is completed in the past. We have taught, the action is completed now in the present. There's also a perfect infinitive active. Again, that stem from the fourth principal part and this ni ending. Okay, it's always accented there on the penult. Pepaideuk ni, to have taught. All right, let's compare three of the infinitives that we know. First, the present infinitive active, which always has imperfective aspect. So we'll translate it to be teaching, paideuen. The aorist infinitive active, which has aoristic aspect, we'll translate it to teach. And so paideusesthai, which has no augment, remember, because aorist infinitives and aorist imperatives don't have past time, they just have aoristic aspect. And finally, the perfect infinitive active, which has perfective aspect, to have taught, pepaideukeni. Just as a review, let's also take a look at balo, to throw. So the present infinitive active is balein, to be throwing. It has imperfective aspect. The second aorist infinitive active is balein, to throw, that has aoristic aspect. And the perfect infinitive active is beblekenai, to have thrown, with perfective aspect. So we're going to finish up by looking at a bunch of principal parts. And the takeaway here really is that you need to memorize principal parts. But we're going to take a look at a bunch of them anyway and look at some of the patterns that do appear. So first off, paideo, paideuso, epaideusa, pepaideuka. Okay, the stem there ends with vowel. So we're just adding the kappa. And it reduplicates nicely in the beginning, right? Pepai. For poieo, which is a contract verb, we lengthen this epsilon and get an eta before the kappa. The same happens with zeteo, to seek. Zeteo, though, it begins with a zeta. And so instead of reduplicating quite the same way as pepai and pepoi, we just add the epsilon there as our reduplication. All right. And if we wanted to augment that to make a pluperfect, actually it just stays the same. Okay. We're not going to do anything to that. So angelo. So angelo ends in a liquid. So we're adding the kappa right after that liquid. Angelo begins with an alpha, and so to reduplicate it, we're just going to lengthen it there. And again, in the pluperfect, nothing's going to change. There's nothing more we're going to do to the beginning of that fourth principal part. Othello, wish, again, we're going to do exactly the same thing with the beginning, right? So the epsilon gets lengthened to an eta, and that's not going to change for the pluperfect. But this one has the lambda there, but we're adding an eta before the kappa. So engelka beetheleka. Now lepo has this labial at the end. And it just stays there. We're not adding a kappa or anything. So leloipa, nice duplicated beginning, but leloipa, we're not adding any sort of kappa there. Ripto has a labial plus a tau, and we're going to lose that tau in the fourth principal part. And we're actually roughening the P into a phi. So when you have a stem that ends in a labial like that, sometimes it'll roughen, sometimes it won't. Notice that ripto also begins with a rho. So to reduplicate that, we're going to double the rho and put an epsilon in front. Right? And again, that one's not going to change in the pluperfect. All right, peogo. So we have this gamma here. So we have a palatal or velar at the end of the stem. And there it is in the fourth principal part. We're not going to add a kappa to that. Notice that when we reduplicate here, the phi turns into a p there. So pathoga. Dioko, we also have a velar there, but this time we've roughened it. Again, there's not really a way to predict that. That's why you have to, even if you know these rules, you have to memorize your principal parts. Finally, akuo, its stem actually ends in a digamma. And so we're not putting a kappa or anything in there. Okay, and this one also reduplicates. The ak reduplicates to akake. For the pluperfect of this, you can either stay the same, right, akeko, or you can lengthen that initial alpha to an, here, I'll put it up here, to an eta. So either a keiko or a keiko for the pluperfect. So the takeaway is there are patterns here, but when it comes down to it, you really need to memorize your principal parts.